Back after I call the meeting to order. I'll call the advisory committee meeting to order, and please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hi, Jules. Okay, we now have 4 people here.
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Before we had a quorum, I asked Kelly a question about the budget versus actual.
Yeah,
So I have the answers to those questions about Chapter 90 and the short-term interest. And rather than explain that to you over the phone, I will email you. It'll be in the minutes, and I'll email you a short blast about that, as well as Will. And when Paul gets here, I think he's going to come at 6:30.
okay,
All right.
all right.
So we just
Yep.
called the meeting to order, and we're going to pick up from there. All right.
All right,
Okay.
all right.
So we got Chapter 90. We got our
And I'm just gonna
short-term
throw my heat into it.
interest. All right. Like I said, the other thing are the special articles. The dump body, we had no problem with. The senior center, I figured out today.
So the senior center went out to bid. Unfortunately, the bids came in much higher, and what I usually do is I put out to bid the most important, what I consider to be the most important project first, to see how that bid comes in, and then we actually have the specs for the Templeton Center roof to go, but because the senior center came in at $160,000, almost 60% above, we've got to take a step back and figure out what to do with that project first. So the order of those projects will be senior center, Templeton Center, once we have a senior center contract, and then the mini split here once we have a roof contract. Because those monies are fungible across those articles. The boiler replacement did go out for proposals and is under contract to Hootela's. Unfortunately, something came up and Alan wasn't able to meet with me this afternoon. So I can't tell you if that's actually been done at this point or not, but we have not been, it is under contract, we just haven't been invoiced for it yet. And those are the special articles. The dump body and the 6-wheel dump truck are being used together. And that truck has been ordered. It is unfortunately a 10 plus or minus lead time. And we don't expect to get it until probably October sometime. Hopefully get it earlier, but it very well could be October. And those are the appropriated special articles. I'll have Kelly address all the CPC articles, if that's, unless there's any other questions on those.
No, it's none for me. Sure. So, actually, it was the concern was, the monies, it looked like it hadn't been spent, and it had been a year. And like I said, I knew off the top of my head, and Bob was on top of that with capital.
It's actually been since the middle of November.
The dump body.
The dump body was the annual town meeting, but the truck itself and the senior center and such.
But
Those
the-
haven't been quite a year as much. Part of what happened with that was we had a very limited spec, and it just didn't meet mass standard. So we had to get an architect, do detailed specs in conformance with the statute, and as I said, I don't know if you saw yesterday's newspaper, the Gardner Airport hangar, they estimated at 525, came in at, I don't know, multiples.
Yeah, it's way,
We had the same problem with the police station, we had the same problem with this. So we're gonna have to regroup and kind of figure out what to do.
yeah, because the period of, all the contractors hunting and looking for work is passed by. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, so it's, you know,
Exactly, so we're gonna work with the architect and try to regroup and get that out to bid, in the next 45 days or so.
For the police station?
No, the senior center
Oh,
siding
seniors.
project.
Well, yeah, that's been
yeah, the siding, they,
dragging along.
no, it came in higher, so you can't, you know. It's the public, you just can't.
100,000 is what it was budgeted, and I think you said 160.
The estimate was actually 75, so I goosed it to 100, hoping I'd
Oh.
have enough.
Hmm.
And the bid was just that much more.
You only got one bid?
Only one bid, I'm afraid.
Hmm.
And none of the locals.
No kidding.
So, if I recall, those were the only questions. There were a couple other things,
Do you want us to address the CPC special articles at all, or set on those?
No,
I was gonna say, somebody did have a question last week regarding the fire cabinets in the assessor's office, that there was $12,000 allotted for that we've spent $6,700, I believe.
Yeah, that'll
There
be
was-
closed back, because that's the remaining.
Mhm.
Luann was able to get a deal on them since we bought multiple of them,
yeah.
so it only cost the $6,700. So that money will go back to the CPC.
And that was explained in a newspaper article a while back, when they did when she did the cabinets got done or whatever.
And I think some of those
remember.
other articles are get rolled back too as well.
Yeah, the Grange Hall, because I had spoken with Mr. Henshaw, and the Grange Hall should be closed. Scout Hall is still open, Conservation is still open. The 4 Elm Street, we have to come up with an architectural plan for that park. It's not something we can just put in, and that's not been a huge priority. And then the tomb restoration is also, those are completely finished, so those will be closed, and the fire cabinets. So the only thing that's gonna be left is the Scout Hall, Conservation, and 4 Elm Street by the end of the fiscal year.
And do please remember, those funds roll back to the CPC,
CPC.
not to free cash.
I have a question.
Yes,
Does the CPC projects that are closed out still have money remaining? Money goes back to CPC, does that need a town meeting article to move that money back to CPC?
No, it goes back to where it was voted from. So if they voted it from the historic preservation, the money goes right back to that. When the committee votes to close those projects when they're completed.
did you catch
Okay.
that?
It would then need a town meeting vote to come back out again,
Right.
but it doesn't need a town meeting vote
Left over just rolls
to
back.
be deposited.
Okay.
And that is,
The CPC article in the town, on the warrant, is that the same one that we voted no to? The land that the state has? Is that the same article again?
Man, they're bringing it back.
yes.
Yeah,
I remember, John said, I think on town floor, that they would probably relook at it and,
It's all right.
and bring it back, but.
That's some swamp land they can buy.
Okay,
Not really, I live on a hill.
is there anything else on the budget versus actual?
That was, I mean, the general questions, concerns was looking at how far through the year we are, generally speaking, and looking at the percentages spent throughout, and it just, it
They're
seemed.
close, yeah, they're
Some of
very-
some of them were very close,
Yeah.
some weren't quite so close. I mean, we're more than 50% of the way through the year, yet there's some that are sitting at 45, 47, 50%. And is the expectation that they're just things that are coming in at the tail end of the year that would be expending? Some
Some
of
of it is on some of the projects. I do try to get folks to wait as deep into the year as we can, both for cash flow purposes, and also, in case there's budget issues with snow and ice, I can't meet some other way.
like we have now.
One
Because we
account
still
is,
have
it was
snow
the
now.
first year we had the account, the building projects, and I think we may have, you know, our eyes may have been a little bit bigger than our appetites, or vice versa, you know what I mean? In terms of really getting those projects out to bid and such, because it's the first year we had a really integrated buildings and grounds, and we went and inspected all the buildings and said, what are the projects that we need? So those are a little bit behind where we need to be. And they're also suffering from getting some interested contractors, just struggling to get people's attention.
Is there anything at the state level that might be able to help us with contractors get? I'm just, I don't know.
It's the economy in general, and so they're very, very busy, and during the 09, 010 and such crash, a lot of the labor unions didn't bring in the apprentices the way that they normally did, because they just didn't have work to put them on.
Okay.
So it's a problem that'll be solved by the next crash.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, okay.
The other thing I just wanted to comment on, and I'm not sure if you're not getting these quarterlies, we'll get that fixed. But I know that one of your members had a question about, you know, something looked at 97%. The accounts don't trend perfectly. Can you give them, please? And if you're not getting those quarterlies, I do give them to the select board first as a courtesy. And we'll make sure, I'll get this fixed going forward, that you're getting these.
Thank you.
But the finance team, when they present their report, looks, we're at 50% of the year, and I asked them to look at accounts. It's just one copy. I didn't get a chance to make
Okay.
copies of it, Jeff.
Okay.
So the finance committee looks in at a team, and if we're at 50% of the year, 25, 75, but the account is dramatically above that, we try to give it a little explanation of why it is. So if you got a $1,000 account, and it's got an $800 training item in it, and that training happens in July,
It's gonna,
it's gonna look out of shape. And for instance, the insurance and benefits in July really looks completely out of whack because we cut a $600,000 check to the Worcester Retirement and $150,000 to the insurance companies. So we spend almost 30% of the account in the first month. So we'll make sure you're getting those quarterly reports that contain those explanations of accounts that look a little bit out of whack.
and that saves some money when you pay those item lump
Huge,
sum.
yeah.
In some instances,
This is,
it's,
I mean,
how much do you
Worcester
recall?
Regional, I think we saved about $12,000 or $13,000.
Yeah,
I recall, I remember that from before.
It's definitely worth it.
I know there was a few lump sum things, it's like it goes from fully allocated, and then you're looking at zero, but it's because if you pay it up, you save a significant amount of money.
exactly. So we'll make sure you get those quarterlies in the future going forward.
Julie, do you have any other questions on the budget, on the expenditure ledger?
I just had a question about the FY17 audit and the management letter in the E911 grant.
Okay, with regards to the E911 grant. What's your question? You're on speaker, so,
Yeah, I thought that was one of the things that the FY17 audit was going to address.
Yes, and the exit conference will be next Monday night at the selectmen's meeting. They just finalized everything with, that they needed to get from the water department and everything. So we'll have the final audit and the management letter next Monday night at the selectmen's meeting.
And the management letter actually refers to the delay. Not a fault blame thing, just a matter of fact, the auditor that the light department had was not as expeditious in completing their work as we would have liked. And we couldn't finish ours until theirs was done, because we have to incorporate their results into our audit. You're welcome to attend that Monday night. We will distribute that to you Tuesday morning after the audit's been presented to the select board. We would ask for any questions within 2 weeks, so we can get those to the auditor and get you answers.
Okay. Thank you.
It's less than 10 pages this year.
Woo-hoo,
We're halfway through. That's good.
Saving some trees.
yeah.
Well, only 1 year.
Hopefully, that's all good news.
I mean, there was substantial progress. I don't want to.
I know you can't really discuss it.
I don't want to
till then, but-
undercut how much progress we have yet to make, but there was substantial progress that was made.
Went from 35 pages to 10.
That's good.
So, yeah, we made some good progress.
And more than 10 pages of uh-ohs last year.
Yeah,
This is good.
All right.
It's on track.
So, is that it, Julie? As far as your questions?
That was it.
Okay. So that will be Monday, Board of Selectmen's office at 18:30. Let me email that to everybody.
Jeff, before we get into the budget, the warrant, or any other questions you have, I just want to, one housekeeping issue, remind you that I've started to work on the voter guide. And I'm trying, I don't know if I'll get this pulled off, but I'm trying very much to have those ready on election day so that voters can take them with them and have them for 2 weeks before they get to the town meeting. To the extent this committee's interested in having its report, recommendations incorporated in that, so it's a single document, just if you can try to keep that in mind.
We are shooting to have our pre-town meeting on May 2nd.
So that's,
So
if you kind of know where you're headed and you're just waiting to finalize it for your pre-town meeting, and I can have things that next morning, then it is possible. I could have some stuff ready for the election day.
So, and we doubled up some meeting time. Trick is to get members, but,
Well, I mean, the offer's
Right.
there if you want.
Right. But that is, we moved up the pre-town meeting, so we would have more time to get info out. Let me make a note to myself. Okay. I wish the member that had was here, but the, Julie, do you have any questions specific on the budget? I know Will had a question or wanted an explanation about the override, but before I turn to the warrant, do you have anything in the budget?
Not right now.
Okay,
I don't have anything specific right now.
okay, where, it's way back here someplace. There we go. there was a question concerning the override article. With, and let me turn back, page mark this.
16.
The amount, there was a, okay. The fire and EMS personnel budget requested or, and administrator recommended is at 277,500. It's on page 101 in the book. And the notation of the amount of money estimated in the ambulance receipts fund would seem to cover that amount. I'm trying to remember. I believe that was his point. And then, at looking at the override, it seemed there was money being asked in the,
Oops, Julie, sorry.
that's all right, in the override that was gonna equate to more than what was requested by the department head budget. And if you could and I know the ambulance receipts fund will not cover the benefits package.
So there's a couple different ways to look at these numbers, and they don't tie together perfectly depending upon which way you look at them, and you will find yourself with less hair as you try to, depending upon how fine a point you try to put on this. Looking at this in simplest terms, the fire chief asked for roughly $746,000. 20,000 of that was capital. So when you strip that out, his request was about $726,000. We gave him $438,000, so he's short about $288,000. When you add the $110,000 or so in benefits, $115,000, that's right around $400,000. Then you squeeze it, bend it, try to take a few things out, because the board had kind of picked a cap of 60 cents. You're down around the 376. The other way to look at it is that after you took all of the net new revenue for the town and you pulled out what we had proposed to give to the schools, that 2.5% for each body, you had roughly $60,000 left for the town as a total. Then when you took out some of the things we had to pay, no matter what, the electricity to the light company, the insurance and benefits, the Worcester Regional Retirement, we were in the hole about $170,000. When you add the 2 full-time firefighter EMTs that were needed, plus benefits, plus this, plus that, you start to get back up towards the 376. If he's torn the numbers apart in a different way, I would need to know how he tore them apart so I could kind of do that same comparison and sort out a better answer that is more on point to the way he may have looked at the numbers. So I'm happy to do that, but I don't completely understand the question the way it's being presented.
I'd like, again, I think he was looking at specifically the personnel at, $277,500, and the ambulance receipts fund estimated to be, whatever the number may be, and
Well, there's a lot more to the ambulance than the personnel.
I don't
and
think
the
he was
benefits.
looking at the fire department as a whole. I think he was concentrating
Right,
on.
there's $55,000 roughly in lease payments just on the ambulance and the defibrillator that goes with it. Then there's the billing to coastal, and there's all these other things. The ambulance is a lot more than just the personnel. And if you look at the override, you'll see that what we did on the labor was we took exactly what the chief had asked for minus the rework, and that's what we put back in. So, and we highlighted every page. You know, I somehow wasn't able to grab the exact grade for every time I highlighted it, but we tried to show you where all those differences were.
Like I said, I wish he was here to, he could relay how he was looking at it. I'm just going by the numbers that he put out. It looked like he was looking at personnel and the ambulance receipts to cover that.
Well, I've got two very quick and dirty ways to look at it without spending a lot of time on it, and you can see that both come into that neighborhood of that 376. And I think, Jeff, you attended the school budget subcommittee with me, and so you know how we got from the 376 to the 470 in change. That was basically the schools. I was able to find a way to deal with half of it. We dealt with some of it in the override, and we dealt with a little bit just with cuts they're there. They're not being
Right.
replaced. So, again, not to belabor it, but let me know how we've taken the numbers apart, and I'll be happy to look at it.
Can I ask something in general? Well, it's just kind of hit me. Forever and a day, we've talked about all the departments getting their supplies from a source so that everybody has the same. Because emergency management, you got $1,000. And it's basically for copy papers, Xerox, ink cartridges, 3-ring binders. You know, that's something that really needs to get done. Maybe your guy Friday there could work on that.
At some point, maybe, but truthfully,
But-
what is the benefit of that at this point is so nominal.
No,
by
I don't know, it
comparison
adds
to
up,
everything el-
you know?
But I have to compare that towards everything else that's still on the plate.
Yeah, but I mean, you have somebody that's got some time, you could give him a project.
I mean, we do have a contract that we have with Staples Advantage,
Oh, that's
which
good.
is, we can get reduced price
Yeah.
for our supplies and stuff, and each department has their own account with Staples Advantage, so they offer us
That's better
discount
than
prices
the
on
way it
certain
was
things.
before.
Right,
You know,
right.
people would buy Autodesk from
That
God only
goes,
knows who.
Right,
Makes
and
no
now,
sense.
and here in Town Hall, now that we are all here, we do have pooled our supplies. Nobody buys anything unless you go room to room and see if anybody has it before you buy it.
And that,
Hey, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Ka-ching,
Staples
ka-ching.
Advantage, that goes back a few years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, so that was,
That's a
it was
goal.
a thing that was done, and it did save some from buying from Mason, or the way they were
Pennies, you
buying it
know, they
before.
add up. You got quarters last week, I mean, really.
Let's see. Yes, Jules?
I had a question about what this override actually does, the ALS service. Does this provide for ALS service, if this is successful and passes, does it fund an ambulance that needs to be replaced? Does it fund the software for the DFIS? And does it fund enough staff to do 24/7 ALS service?
So, the ambulance lease payment is in the regular budget. We have to make that payment whether the override passes or not.
Okay.
It provides for 4 career firefighter EMTs. It does not provide for 24/7 career EMT, firefighter EMT coverage. There will still be shifts, the weekend and such, and I'd have to get the chief to just explain that to you. It still requires that on-call paramedics, firefighter paramedics, make some of those calls. One of the reasons that we have only used $250,000 in ambulance receipts is twofold. The first was based upon the Department of Revenue's decision last year, or advice, that we can only appropriate what we have on hand of the town meeting day, and concerns from this body, we reduced from 325 to 250. So that lined up the revenues. The second reason to try to reduce the contribution to the budget annually is you can only afford a ambulance of roughly $175,000 next year when you have to replace it, because you have $40,000 in your budget for lease payments. 4,000 of that is the annual interest, leaving 36,000. 5 times 36 is roughly 180. Your new ambulance next year will cost you roughly $250,000. So and you're not gonna have the room in your operating budget to go from that $40,000 to that $53,000. So just like we're proposing with the fire truck and the cruiser and the 1-ton, we are hoping to let the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation build up a little bit, so we have some to use against the operating budget, and we have some that we can buy down the price of the ambulance. And maybe it's $237, maybe it's $240, I don't know, but it's certainly more than you can carry with your current lease payments. And then we can have a lease payment that goes up a little bit, $42.5, $45, something like that. Does that hopefully answer your question?
Partially, yes.
If I may add on to what you just said, because it struck something here. So if I'm not mistaken, just for clarification purposes, we're using, as far as a budgetary purpose, we're using $250,000 from the ambulance receipts reserved towards the budget. Any excess above that amount will just be saved, left.
It sits in the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation until and unless town meeting votes to move it out of there.
Okay.
That's a
Okay.
restricted account.
Yep.
Only town meeting can vote that money out.
Thank you.
Do you have any additional questions on that, Julie?
No.
Okay, you all set?
Just one thing, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that if the override does not pass, and we stop billing for ambulance as of July 1, that 250 and change that sits there now, next year will only be about 125. So we'll have to close whatever gap that is, and the following year it'll be 0, give or take. And we'll have to close that gap again.
All right, is there, anybody have any other questions on the warrant? And that was kind of a combination of budget and warrant, but,
Say, Mr. Chairman, I have a question here regarding Article 29. I believe there was a question asked about this in the last meeting, and I was wondering if Mr. Terenzini could clarify. The article reads, raise or appropriate the sum of $92,500 to pay for the first year of a 6-year lease of a fully equipped fire apparatus. And that was interpreted as increasing taxes.
Well, I mean, anything you vote
Right.
is taxed at the end. This year, you had the last payment of roughly $92,500 due on the 252 Baldwinville. So the choice was, do we, sort of wipe the sweat off our brow, say, oh, thank God, now we can help support the operating budget? Certainly a lot of towns would do that. Or were we going to say, nope, that was capital, we have capital needs, we're gonna keep that money over here on the capital side of the ledger? And that's what the board voted to do so far. So this is not an exclusion, it's already in the tax base. So would the tax rate be a little bit lower if it wasn't voted? Yes. But people are already being taxed to raise this 92.5.
That's what I wanted clarification on, because it seems as though there was some confusion from people where it says raise or appropriate, that they thought that it might be a new tax, new money rather than, the recouped money, let's say, from a previous.
The phrase appropriate simply means you're going to authorize this spending. And as I write things, is generally used when you don't need taxation. You have another source of funding that you can draw that from, a reserve fund, free cash, transfer. Raise is taxation.
And that's what it says here, raise and appropriate.
Yes.
So just, that's why I just wanted to clarify, just so that you could clarify, that it's money that's already there. We're just appropriating it.
Yeah, so we can have capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the 1.9 that was like temporarily borrowed, and there was like 750,000, somewhere right in there, that was spent on engineering all along the way. Whatever wasn't spent out of the 1.9 was basically like given back to the bank, and it was chosen to pay that money back out of the existing budget rather than go for a debt exclusion question to pay for that. So it was coming out of the budget. So now it will be all taken care of, and you can either,
Freed up cash.
not spend it and knock a little bit off tax, or do something worthwhile with it. It depends on your philosophy, if you think it's good or bad, but it's not a new debt exclusion.
No, it's not a debt exclusion. I'm trying to avoid debt exclusions for fire equipment. We have 6 pieces. Frankly, they should be getting replaced every 5 years. Max 30-year schedule. This is gonna be a 36-year schedule. It's too long. But we can't rely on debt exclusions constantly for critically needed apparatus. We've gotta find a way to fund these on a more sustainable basis. So, is this perfect? No, but it's a start.
I've got a couple
I agree.
questions on this.
On Article 29 or number 1?
Article 29.
Okay.
My question is, how firm is the total price of $555,000? How is that number derived?
So, when we started this, the chief started working with several suppliers who have contracts either through the state or with public consortiums. Each of them confirmed to him that they thought they could provide the vehicle in the $475,000 plus or minus range that we were looking for. So we took that and then we calculated out what the interest rate would be. I can't recall exactly. I think I ended up using 5% to try to have a safety valve. And so these are probably as good as we can get right now. The chief should have firm quotes that'll be good for only about 30 days prior to town meeting. But we're going to have to, find a way, frankly, to trim the apparatus to live within the price, because we've only got the 92.5. The only thing that could save us a little bit is you won't know till the end because you bid the lease at the time of delivery. So they're not going to give you a rate lock in this month to only lend you the money 10 months later.
Yeah.
My other question is, why does this article require a 2/3 vote?
We checked with the Department of Revenue because it was our belief that since there's an escape clause in here where you can get out of it every year, that it only required a majority vote. And that was my opinion, that was town council's opinion. So we asked him to circle back to the Department of Revenue, and it's their position that even though there's an escape clause in it, it is still effectively a debt. And they put that in the classification of requiring a 2/3 vote as if it was long-term bonding.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on Article 8.
8.
8.
Okay. You all set on Article 29, Julie?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just bear with me while I get to it, please.
I'm having difficulty wrapping my head around the changes in dates. So I'm hoping for an explanation, because we're going from the first Monday in May to the third Monday in May. And then we're moving things for the annual town meeting, basically shall be considered on the Wednesday preceding the election of town officers. So are we saying we're going to have the town meeting before the election?
Yes, that's the whole intent. The theory is that when you have ballot questions, such as you have this year, if you can have the conversation with town meeting ahead of time, that debate can help inform the public of what's going on and can be a good venue for getting information out, having citizens ask questions, answering their questions, and then those citizens that come to the meeting hopefully spread that information out there. Originally, we wanted to try to get the election into June. Hubbardston, if you go through Hubbardston, you'll notice theirs is on a Tuesday, but most towns think of as election day, the 12th of June. However, our partner in the regional school district is reluctant to move it at all. So we're trying to find a balance. Because one of the other things we were trying to do was to find a way to get a little more time to work on the budget. So we're working with our partners in Phillipston, trying to move this, or working with our partners on the school committee to get a draft budget on February 15, final budget by March 15, and those extra few weeks, plus the ability to communicate with the citizenry, we hope will make for a better budget process.
Okay, so what about, how do you plan on handling that? There's some things that get put, that end up on the budget, on the ballot, right? And have to go to town meeting, or there's a certain order that things need to be done in.
They don't actually have to be done, you don't have to have, in the case, what you're doing is, there's timing issues. You have to have the election and the town meeting within certain times, within certain dates, but you don't have to have one before the other.
Well, no, what I mean is that there are things that have come up, and I'm trying to, I know there've been situations where, and I think it was around, I don't know if the school budget or around school things, and
Yeah.
my memory may be off here, but that we had to have it had to go out on to the ballot, and then we had to vote on it again at town meeting.
Yeah.
And then, I don't remember what it was about, but there was a definite order of things, and so if we're swapping things around, is that going to either, one, extend those situations, or we're going to have to expend the money to have another town meeting, a special town meeting?
It shouldn't. The
shouldn't.
trick, if any article that's gonna have a ballot question,
Yeah,
is to always make the town meeting article contingent upon the election results. So if you want a debt exclusion on it, let's say, if you don't remember to put the contingency clause in there, and it passes at town meeting, but then it fails at the ballot box,
I think we've had that situation. where
Yep.
That's exactly.
you can go float that bond issue. There's nothing that stops you.
Yeah.
And it's in the tax base. You're
The
stuck.
fine print.
Same thing, let's say with an override. If you say, well, you'll vote, $470,000, you forget to put the contingency language in the town meeting warrant article, and the ballot question fails, that's a valid appropriation that you have to figure out how you're gonna deal with. So as long as you remember, the town meeting warrant article should always have the contingency language in it. And you make sure that the town meeting and the election vote are within those, and I can't remember if it's 60 days or 90 days.
I think for a town meeting, it's X number of days, and if it's a special town meeting, it has to be done, it's shorter.
Right, it's just,
I think the example is given, one is if you have a special town meeting like in May or something, that you have to have it done by sometime in August, and an annual town meeting, I think you have, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's like in September,
Yeah.
somewhere.
It's
around-
90,
there's
and-
a-
it's 90 and 60
Yeah,
days, so let's
somewhere.
say you decide in August you wanna have a debt exclusion or a override question on the state ballot. You then have to remember to look at the date of that state election and have your town meeting within those 60 days, I believe it is.
Yeah, it's something,
I just want to make sure we're not, by,
no, it's, no matter what when you have your election or your town meeting, you have a certain time frame for a special and an annual, yeah, it just has to be done by that time frame.
It
It's-
doesn't matter which order you do them in, provided you always remember the contingency language.
okay.
And you always take the two actions within those, whatever they
Timeframe,
are.
whatever the time frame is.
Whatever those windows are.
Because we have had a thing, an override question on the election, and it fails. It goes to town meeting and it passes, and had another special town meeting to try it again within a certain time frame, because it was a contingency article. And there's a vice versa thing on there too. If the override passes at the ballot, you go to town meeting, you don't have to appropriate. I don't know why you would vote for one and then not appropriate the money, but, you have that choice too. But there's a time limit. It doesn't matter which order you do it in, you can't wait till the next,
Right,
next year's
yeah.
annual town meeting. But as long as you meet the time frame, you can do it either
Either
way.
way. Okay,
And I
all
do
right,
wanna be
that's-
clear on this override. There is no, and we'll bring the question back in the fall. The override either passes or it doesn't, and on July 1, that's the budget that we have. Because the idea of appropriating the money and saying, well, then we'll just try again in the fall.
And then if it fails, then you're
And if
into
it,
the year.
if
and-
it fails,
Exactly.
you're that much deeper into the year, and all of a sudden you're scrambling. You guys been there, done that.
It's not fun.
I can't recommend it.
It's not fun.
Well, also,
It's not easy.
if a new selectman is on board and he has no idea what's gone on,
Right.
he's stuck at that town meeting. But on the other side of it, the new guy is stuck with the budget that the last guy passed. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You hope that people run for office that know what's going on.
So
And
we'll
most of the
watch,
time
we'll
they
watch
don't.
those
Okay.
conversations with our
Okay.
partners, both in Phillipston and the NRSD. And this may, float a little bit here. But the basic driving intent was primarily to have the town meeting before the votes, so we can have those conversations with the community.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Article 30, how much is this infield groomer?
Again, if you can just bear with me
Oh, you get there.
a moment,
It's on
please.
page 18.
18.
I think I think that question's come up before.
The infield groomer in total, Bob, do you remember?
I think it's either 22 or 18.
Yeah, I think in the end it came down to like 18 or so.
Yeah.
So is it 10,000 in Article 31?
It's 10,000 and then
So
a
you got-
contribution from the light department.
Okay, because it's kind of deceiving. It looks like a $10,000 item when you've really asking for another 10,000 in Article 31, I think.
So,
Not very clear, that's all.
so if you look at page 274 of your budget book, you're gonna see that the final pricing, I guess, Bob, came in around 15. And we're asking for and have approved so far a $5,000 contribution from the light plant
Whoops.
and $10,000 from the town to make up the 15,000.
Right.
The light plant wishes to participate in these primarily in capital items. They like to be able to just, here's the invoice, cut the check and whole, and they're done. So it's really restricted to capital, and I have to try to
Okay, it just
figure out
was,
things that will be acceptable.
the way it
them
was
that they're willing to
listed
fund.
was kind of clear.
And if you look on 275, it explains
Yep.
that.
But most people aren't gonna have this book when they go to town meeting,
But
okay? All they get to look at is that right there. So we're just trying to clear things up.
Well, it's basically a return on investment, because
they're gonna save on labor,
Labor.
and also, that's a big town asset over there. There's a lot of potential there, and the rec department is trying to get that going with that concession stand and everything. And if the fields look like junk, those teams are going someplace else. I mean, they're not professional, baseball team coming in there, but
My husband
They're-
my first husband played ball for 20 years. I sat on a
It's
bench.
not a
Know
pickup
all
league
about
either.
it.
But those teams, they
No, I
take,
know.
come in and
I
they,
know that. He played
they take
fast pitch.
serious, and if the field looks like junk, they're gonna go someplace else. And we can make that concession stand work, create more, revenue for the, that goes towards the rec committee and stuff, and it takes pressure off taxation to be used.
That's right, all those incomes, if the revolving fund that we've proposed is approved, all those rental fees and that income will go into the rec, community services revolving fund to provide additional
And,
sources of money for more programming.
because you hear it a lot about, well, long-term planning, we gotta do some financial planning. Well, I know it doesn't say it in the warrant article, not in the motion, but if you keep up with things, that's what this is gonna help, I think. And it reduces the labor, and those, that's seasonal help, they can be doing other things, you keep them less. It's like the drain basin thing, it frees up people to go out and do some
Something
road
else.
maintenance that's really needed, rather than dig sand out of a basin. And it's cheaper. So, that's to me, that's the way you need to look at like that piece of equipment. And that was, if people watch the selectmen's meetings when we had the budget hearings, that was an item that was discussed. We had a little bit of discussion on
I
it.
was questioning the way it was listed in 30 and 31. It wasn't real clear, that's all.
Unfortunately, you know, if they cut us a check, then that would be there and I could just appropriate
Yep,
it out.
It's
But
all right, I'm just
they're not willing to
asking.
do that. I'm pleased we're at least getting, we have a 5-year agreement at this point, gentleman's handshake, on the amount and how we're gonna phase in electric, and that'll be replaced with capital. So I think it is some progress over where you were a couple years ago.
That's good good question, though, to get clarification. So you're all set.
Yeah, That's all.
In that Article 31,
Yes,
using money from the Pajari Stabilization Fund.
Looks like it.
Yeah. But would not that use the 2/3 vote? This is the stabilization fund, not a majority vote.
let me see, there's Article 31.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jules.
I think you may be right, and we'll double check on that one.
What does it say on the,
What's it say?
It's a majority and it's gotta be 2/3, I think.
in the draft, it said 2/3.
Yeah,
So
we'll-
that's
we'll-
probably
we'll-
it.
We'll double check on that. I know that the contributions were changed by the Muni Mod Act, but we'll go back and check on that one. Thank you.
Yes, the draft had 2/3.
Yep.
I'd like to go back to Article 8.
Okay,
That's what I was just asking about.
Does Templeton have a similar article on their warrant?
Not as of yet. We have sent them a letter and asked them to do so. Hopefully, your partners will see the merit in doing it. If not, there's no requirement other than that the district have a combined election. This town with 85% of the people can determine what is best for it, and then the district will need to determine what's best for it.
that's something I think should be addressed when the district agreement gets redone. Phillipston people voting for Templeton representation and vice versa, that's nuts to me.
It's a fairly common approach when they're attempting to give a fixed number of representatives to different towns, and that's the means of getting around the one man, one vote, when they don't want to use proportional voting. So the larger town or towns don't want to say to the smaller town, okay, you can elect 2 people, and between those 2 people, they can have 15% of the vote. So there are some other districts I can point you to that are around the same balance, 80-20, 85-15. They have the same thing, and it's all designed to give them some fixed representation and not violate the constitutional one person, although it was one man at the time, one person, one vote rule. There are some things that, you may need to talk about in the district agreement. The thing that's a primary concern to me is improving those dates for delivery of a draft and a preliminary budget.
So my point, this vote, this Article 8, is not contingent on Phillipston doing anything. We can vote this without them doing anything.
You can vote it without them doing anything and then deal with a little bit of the fallout. That has happened in some of the locations. Or you can continue to hope that your partners will see the merits in accommodating, without great problem to them, something that their partner would like to have happen. I mean, frankly, this is not a huge ask. And the town is backed off of trying to have our election in June so we could push the town meeting even further back. And, Jeff, I don't think you were there. I think Paul Grubb was there that evening.
Yes.
And we proposed multiple different ways to try to meet everybody's concerns.
Yes, I did watch the meetings, and I did see that. And it was, well, I'll be nice.
Well, then I think you saw the effort to, if you don't like that, can we do this? If
This
that doesn't
one,
work, can we do
Try
that?
this one. There was options put out there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but, so. Are you all set with Article 8, Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we are legally allowed to vote this, and the Attorney General won't shut it down if so it doesn't go along with that.
No, I can tell you that a very similar article in a very similar district was approved by the larger community, subsequently approved by the Attorney General, and then the smaller community did come along afterwards, but was reluctant to do so until the issue was forced. It was unfortunate, but it was a similar situation, 85-15. Not the greatest relationship between the
No,
partners.
yeah, no one wants to be told what to do, so.
But also, at some point, if you need something and you're 85%,
Yeah.
you have some leverage and you need to use it.
Yeah. Tail don't wag the dog. Excuse me.
Wouldn't like my.
I say what I say, and that's the way it works.
Pay 85, you have more say.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have
I
anything?
didn't have anything else.
I would like to bring your attention to Article 1.
All right.
The snow and ice deficit is a gift that just continues to plague us.
Perhaps tomorrow evening?
Well, whoever keeps ordering the snow needs to stop and order spring instead.
Well, you know, this last weekend, I was in Charleston,
Gang
West
up on
Virginia,
me.
and Friday and Saturday were mid-80s. And I was hiking in the mountain, and then on Sunday, when I went back up the mountain, it was snowing.
Carter
So-
hiked up a mountain.
Believe it or not, yeah, I know
I
I don't look
don't
it.
believe
You should see my kayak too, but,
Yeah.
the litigation is looking like we might be able to bring it to closure and keep the bills, hopefully a little bit under more control. So you may see, at the town meeting, a little bit of reorganizing of this total amount, because the snow and ice deficit as of today sits around 76. So we will reorganize this a little bit if we can, but I do want you to be aware that at some point after the town meeting, we will need to, through the use of the statutory transfer authority, clean that account up within most likely $15,000 more.
Great, that's okay, and there's a possibility of
More snow.
snow tomorrow.
And unfortunately, we went ahead and ordered the minimum salt, because no one's gonna be happy if I say, well, tomorrow's gonna be 70, so if you can just hold on for 12 hours, we'll be fine. Nobody's gonna buy into that.
I don't know, my plow guy buys into that all the time.
Hey, we got a plastic greenhouse going. Try that, ka-ching, ka-ching.
So,
So that we may have to do some additional cleanup in the May to July 15 window.
well, storms, they just keep lining up out west.
Just
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Just as a question for my own personal on that, so if I understand, we must be sitting around 208,000, 210,000 on snow and ice for this year? That sound about right?
Yeah.
132 and
5 and
You have
70 something?
76.
209,000
as of
209.
this past
this past week.
Friday.
Yeah, but we paid more snow and ice payroll in this week's payroll, and Pam told me that she's got about 5 more bills, and we're gonna have a little bit now for next week, so
Yeah,
it could very much be 215, 220 before it's all said and done.
So the important thing is the effort to try to every year, even if you're only raising it a little bit, is the amount that you set aside for snow and ice to keep trying to make progress. Because when we say we have a balanced budget at town meeting, quite frankly, we have a budget that is annually out of balance by roughly $70,000, give or take, because you always have to clean up the snow and ice deficit at the end of the budget year. We go into that year knowing we're under budgeted in snow and ice.
well, we're planning for climate change.
Well,
We're just ahead of the curve.
you all said, Julie?
Yeah, how much money do we have in free cash right now?
Hang on,
Bear
Carter was
with me a
looking.
minute.
The state doesn't fund their snow and ice.
No, but
Minimal.
if we could be in the 185 range, I'd be a lot more comfortable,
Yeah.
Jeff.
I know, it's one of those things, 200 would, but
Which one is the revenues?
next year you could spend 50.
Free cash.
My husband says it's colder
He's
here
looking
than
for free
lemons.
cash.
Mm.
He's
No, I was just
All the
saying.
time.
Oh.
Oh,
It's
Jesus,
50
you
and
think
we had
I'd work
200.
with 80 down there.
Oh, yeah.
It could be an orange.
Sorry to
Orange is
confuse.
always cold.
Yeah,
Capital's-
well, ship him
capital's
down
money
there.
right there.
That'll
Yeah.
make him happy when he comes back.
That's where that money should be going.
So we had a page in the budget book for the uses of free cash, and I'm just trying to lay my hands on it right now.
But, I'm talking about how much money do we have in free cash right now?
And that's,
What's the
I'm trying to
balance?
find that page.
Whoops, Joel, sorry about that.
I thought it was like 169, but better look in the book. Because my memory is a slacking.
Okay, here it is. So on page 8 of the budget book, we have 399,000 roughly, in some short change, going into the town meeting.
All right, so we have 300,
399, 192 going into the town meeting, and when the budget was prepared, we had planned uses for it. And about 195 or so would have rolled into next year.
So right now, we have roughly 196,000 sitting in,
We have 400,000 right now. Plus,
how much do we have, I can't hear very well, I'm sorry. I'm
Yep.
looking at the budget book, and it says remaining balance FY18 certified free cash is 196,692.
yeah,
that
that's,
that assumes that the proposed appropriations are all approved by town meeting. So going in,
I'm talking right now, at this minute, how much money do we have in free cash?
Approximately 399, 192.
192, thank you.
Okay, and if the articles are approved at town meeting, when you subtract that from that 399, there will be approximately 196,692 left.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had the numbers right before we started discussing the articles at pre-count. The other question I had is, how much money do we have in the different stabilization accounts?
I'm those sheets will be on the balance sheets, they won't be there.
If you give me just a minute, I'll be right back.
We'll
I
get
can
those
tell
for you in a minute. They're on the balance sheet, not on the revenue and expense sheets.
You can, and just email me those numbers. I just would like to have firm numbers before we start discussing this on May 2nd.
Yep,
Okay.
they're just kept on a different sheet, and, we should be able to have those for you in just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
You want me to jot them down and email them you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
The other thing in the packet that I gave you, if there's any questions now or over the next couple of weeks, we do have 2 warrant articles to fund 2 collective bargaining agreements. I gave you the tentative agreement, well, it's been ratified by the select board and ratified by the unions both, which describes the proposed pay raise and any changes to the contract. It's only for 1 year. The reason for that is we didn't get started until mid-March, and the choice was to try to do a quick 1-year deal, or to miss the town meeting and then get further down the road. This is just a lot cleaner. Once we get past the town meeting, we will then start on negotiations for a 3-year pact for each unit. I think there's some very modest pay raises there, especially given where we are in relation to all of our other peer communities, and a couple of nice pro-management things there, particularly around direct deposit, the ability to go to electronic payments in the future, and the ability to reduce over time our health insurance costs on that very expensive PPO plan.
Is that packet, is that in the mailbox? Or-
Those were the last 2 or 3 pages of that packet I left on your desk. They may have been
Oh, okay.
separate sheets. There's one that's 2 pages with the Police Local 155, that's the police officers. And then there's a 1-pager with 155A, which is your dispatchers.
Okay, Julie, in the general stabilization, we have 233,431.87. In the Pajari stabilization, we have 9,277.72. And in capital, we have 41,986.98.
Say that again?
I got it.
40,
So out of these, the general stabilization, CapEx, there's no part of that funding that's going to be utilized in this budget or this proposed budget whatsoever. The Pajari Stabilization Fund is that Article 31 or whatever,
to close that
to
out.
close that account out.
Absent some economic catastrophe, we need to stay away from those until they've been built up to the limits that we called for in the financial management plan.
Thank you.
And even should that economic catastrophe hit you, the financial management plan calls for using those kinds of monies only when you can produce a budget that shows how you work your way back.
You're lucky there's anything left
to
of
a
that.
sustainable level. Well, I mean, there are times when you have to hit that. There are a number of communities that only got through
Trust
the
me.
'08 financial crisis by using those funds. But the financial management plan requires that you do revenue and expense projections that show how you're going to work your way out of it. Not just a statement of, well, we'll figure it out. There should be some
But that doesn't work.
attempt.
They've been trying
Not in
for
my
20
experience.
Trying for 20 years. Haven't
Along with
figured
an
out that it don't
IOU
work
and
yet.
everything's good.
Bad help us all.
The intent is to dissolve the Pajari Fund after it's been reduced to zero. It was only there for holding purposes. There's no new money going into it.
That man did the best he could, and he
Absolutely.
accomplished a lot.
I understand why you did it that way, but should
Well,
the town
no,
see
Should never,
fit to withdraw those monies, that is the end of the
well,
fund.
things have been mighty thin for a long, long time. So by hook or by crook, things got done. More by crook than by hook.
Does anyone, do you have anything else, Julie? You have no more questions?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
Explain that code red thing again, how it went from 6,000 to 8,
And it's gone to zero.
and it's gone to 0? Yeah?
So the code red system allowed you, and I can't remember the exact math, but something like 15,000 message units. So the way this worked is if you were making 3,000 calls, let's say, and the call took a minute, that was 3,000 message units. Well, you could only do 4 or 5 messages in the course of a year. So they were very reluctant to use the system.
Yep.
You also had $560 over in the emergency management for a call-out program that they were using because the code red system was so restricted. So you were paying $6,600. I looked at that and I connected the town with a company that I've used in another community called Blackboard. It started out doing online teaching courses and the like, and they have a program called Connect TY. That program is unlimited usage. And we were able to get unlimited usage for this community and for Phillipston for $8,000
Okay.
instead of the $6,600 that we were paying. Now, subsequently, Code Red has come back and, tried to offer us a better deal. We'll deal with that after the override.
Yep.
Because we had to go and find 85,000, 90,000 and change for the additional of the school. We ended up cutting the Code Red out, and there should be in that package that I gave you last week a set of revision pages
Yep.
that show you step by step how we went through and closed that gap, and that looks like this one. And so we eliminated the community notification system completely. You've made so few calls with it, I made a decision that if
Yeah, they didn't
we
use it
needed to
much.
cut police supplies, $8,000, or cut a system that you frankly use very rarely, we cut it, and then if the override passes, we put it back in with the override. Is that?
It is, now, the school uses a similar type of service,
They do.
and Bonnie Tech uses, I think, a similar type of service. Is there any possibility of combining forces and getting a better rate?
Because of all the privacy, particularly including all of the students, the underage, minority age students, I've been told in the past, and again this time around, that no, we could not let the school build a backbone on top of our system. I'll ask them once again.
No, it's just,
It would
they
make
have a
sense,
certain,
yeah,
they,
like
because
anything
my,
else.
and I may be missing something here, but I think it's the same sort of functionality.
It is the same
and-
sort of functionality.
Because what I'm seeing is, or saying, okay, the school has one, here's all the first grade
like they're
parents, here's all the
paddling on the
second
right
grade
and these
parents.
guys are paddling
Here's-
on the left.
So, here are all our elderly, or here are all of our
And
residents.
you could build
or-
call groups,
Yeah.
but what I've been told in the past and what I was told this time again was because we, the owners and operators of the system, are not supposed to have access to the data for that call group. We can't build them on our backbone.
I would think that, or, I take that as that's what it is, but coming from an IT background, you have an administrator that has rights to this and nobody else does, and you're
Well, they're
good.
the administrator, and we're not supposed to have rights to view the data for all these school children.
Well, it's not, it's for the parents, so it's adults, not kids.
I understand
So,
what you're
okay.
saying, same sort of reaction I had when I was told that the librarian, and Bob had raised this
Yeah.
with me, had to actually be certified by DESE as a teacher, almost teacher qualification.
Oh.
I'm happy to raise it again, but that's what
Or,
I've been told in
or
the past.
maybe, could we go the other way, where the school had it and we use the school?
We
I'm
can-
just suggesting.
We-
it-
We can certainly explore that.
What I wanted to ask you was, I saw that the Luann's group, the assessors, had cut back on something in their budget. Did that go through their board? What the hell was it?
Could you point me to what page you're
is
on,
that?
please?
I don't know, if I didn't put the
Yeah,
page
it's
down.
assessors.
It was,
Department 141, but what page is it?
I was looking at her overlay or one of those kinds of things that she had a lot more money put aside for that, and then it got reduced, and I was just wondering.
Are you referring to the amount reserved for the overlay account?
Yeah.
The difference between when I presented the
Yeah.
budget
Yep.
and
page
when
that
we
was on.
came back at it?
Yeah.
She starts on page 52.
Okay, so
52?
She starts on page 52, I don't know if that's the
I
one
was
you're
just
looking for.
curious, because,
Okay, so on page 5 of the budget,
yeah. I know that hit me when I was looking at it.
you're gonna find that I build a budget using 2.5%
Okay.
of the base levy. By that, the non-debt excluded revenue that we expect to raise. And I do that because I think that's a good place to start. It provides me with a bit of a safety valve during the development of the budget. And it's a good thing that we had it. Because when the schools increased their assessment above and beyond where we hoped they would be, we went to this account and reduced it by roughly $84,000.
Yeah, that's what I was,
That still leaves us with around 1.5%. That's kind of your drop dead. You really shouldn't go below 1.5%. So Luann was more than comfortable with this number, thought it was in excess, is comfortable at the 1.5. This is a means of preparing a budget before you have all the numbers. It's a safety valve, it's
Yeah.
built in. Because if I prepared a budget that only started this number at 150, then I have to go back in and start hacking everything when we have a problem. Now, the
yeah, because what they
allowance for
requested,
abatements or overlay, remember, periodically, and I gave you an amendment, Jeff, at your last meeting to the financial management plan, which showed not only how we would prepare the budget, what the drop dead was, but annually, how you should get an estimate of what was surplus and how much of it you should use towards capital, so that has now been codified as a practice.
So that
Does that,
her board was good with all that? The assessors,
they raised no objection, I mean, this is how the number is set, as long as at the end of the day, there's enough there. And they don't set that amount, though, when the recap sheet is done, they should vote on the recap sheet as a whole, but at the end of, which they do, yes.
Yeah, they do that, yes.
But in the end, this is really a budgeting issue.
all right, well, just wanna make sure.
And that amendment, read through that amendment to the financial management plan, if you got any
Yeah, it's here
questions,
buried somewhere.
let me know.
I have paper, I have a die-in paper, you know, the piles of it. Not as bad as when Marco was here and we got 20 different versions of the budget in 10
Well, the
days.
budget does evolve through, the select board asks questions, or
Well,
you all
it
ask
evolved all
questions.
right.
Or when the school committee comes in with numbers.
Yeah, it evolved, they didn't even vote on the right one at town meeting. That was
This is a different day.
wonderful.
This is a different day.
We hope.
Well, I think this year's budget process certainly went better than last year's. I think last year's went better than the prior, and if we can continue to make some progress with your partners at the school and with Phillipston, having that joint meeting on the school budget was an important step. We need to get that pulled back a little bit and have it be more participatory. But that was a very good added step in the process.
Yep.
No,
Everyone,
Yeah.
any more questions for Carter?
So our department's getting cut $750, huh?
I'm sorry, which one?
The advisory board.
Yes.
Yeah? Well,
he
you
doesn't
know,
like us.
That's all right, you know what? You may kick your butt in the end, because it's only gonna be you that you hurt.
We'll have to lay somebody off.
I just had to
Hey,
find some
that's
money.
all right, that's all right.
Yeah, he just doesn't like us.
Julie, do you have any more questions for Carter or Kelly?
I'm all set.
You all set? Okay.
So if you have questions, one reason I wanted to get in here tonight was, just to be a little bit ahead of the game. If you have questions over the next week or two or so, let me know. If you need me or Kelly to come back in, let us know. I know that, we each have some commitments that we make out there. If we're available, we'll certainly be here. And that offer of, your findings, if you want to do some definitions, I think would be helpful. If you're gonna do them, let me know. If not, I wanna do some plain speak of what is the difference between appropriate, raise and appropriate, what is overlay surplus. I wanna do some plain speak definitions, for the citizenry, at a minimum. We may try to do a few charts or something. Let us know where you think
Yeah,
you're
a lot
headed.
of the new people
And if
in
we can
town don't know.
incorporate some of that, I'd like to try to get that done.
May I ask one thing be done? Is that with these, whenever you have the 9/10 and the 2/3 votes, it's a good idea to know how many people you have in the room, because we ran into that problem at the last meeting where there was a 9/10 vote,
Funny mass. Funny math.
and if you don't know, there are, and I'm just making up numbers here, that there are 200 people in the room, if you don't know what the number is, how can you say it's 9/10? It passed, and so,
Fuzzy math.
because.
Moderator's math is
well,
usually where it
Well,
starts.
yeah, but the thing is, it's
What's that fuzzy
the
stuff?
moderators, part of the moderator's job, at least in some communities, is to put together what you're putting together for the moderator. So if you're doing that, if you could add,
Do a head count.
well, literally.
Of
there-
voters,
well,
not just the
no,
guys sitting in the left.
Yeah, no,
They
it
don't
used to
count.
be, it used to be with Mr., no, well, I don't know if Mr. Bergeron did it, but it was I can't think of his name.
He passed away.
Yes, he passed away, right? He used to,
Ron
before,
Hubbard. Ron Hubbard.
Mr. Hubbard, yes, thank you, Ron Hubbard. before those
Bob
9/10,
Hubbard, rather,
Mr. Hubbard, that before he would do the 9/10 vote, he would say, there are X number of people in the room, and then this requires a 9/10 vote, which means you need X number of people. He would do the math, and even the town meeting minutes also recommends that approach. So, and I'm not trying to tell anybody how to do the job, but those are what the recommendations are.
Well, I mean, the challenge is it takes 9/10 of those people who vote. So you can have 300 people in the room,
But if only 250
but if
vote.
only 100 people vote, it only takes 90 votes.
And the challenge of, like, using, when you check in, right, using those totals, if the 9/10 vote is like the 15 articles in, there's some people that come, they vote on a few articles, and they say, well, you know, I'm going. So you started with 300 people, you know, checked in,
Yeah.
At
but now
$2.99.
there's only 270 there. It's,
So the only way to.
That's what he would do, is that he would actually either recount, or he would do something to make it quite clear how many people were in the room that were, so,
That's.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of towns where it's moderator's math, you know? Everybody in favor, yes, everybody opposed, no. The moderator says there were 154 and 6 against. It's up to the moderator.
And
I will convey to him your thoughts. It's the best I can do.
That would save him embarrassment.
It's my job to make the select board look good, not everybody else.
Oh, the poor guy. Got no friend in the crowd.
I'll convey your thoughts, that's all I can do. I have arranged for him
I
to
think he won't do that
meet town
twice.
council ahead of the town meeting, so they at least have a chance to meet, have some discussion. And we'll provide him the warrant in any fashion he'd like. Some moderators like me to blow it up to, you know, a larger font with more spacing. We'll certainly do whatever we can do to be of help.
all right, any, is everyone all set?
Yeah, I
Yep.
think it's about.
So I think we got all our questions. And we got all the questions that we
This time
had,
around.
except for the Oprah thing, but I can't-
Except for what, I'm sorry?
except for
Will's.
the override question, but it's, I don't know exactly how Will was
He can
looking at it, so
Hash it out after.
I'll convey the,
Well, with
The explanation.
tonight's meeting, we've now had, that I've attended, 11 meetings on the budget. More meetings than I've ever had in any community, on any budget. If there are questions that remain, we had those joint meetings that I thought went
There will be
very
still people
productive.
in the crowd that won't ask questions
Okay.
until that
We'll,
day.
we'll continue to do what we can, but we've built the webpage. We're doing everything we can. Let me know what the question is, and we'll do our best to answer it.
Thank you.
and it may just be clarification, but, I mean, you know, you have the meetings, the opportunity's there, we just can't force people to show up.
We did our best, and I think that the chairman of the select board tried to make sure that the finance advisory committee members this year, I think, was an improvement over last year. I felt more comfortable that you were full participatory members in the process, and we'll just look forward to improving the process for whoever's here next year.
Thank you.
All right, thank you
All
both
set.
for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night, folks.
You do the same.
You too.
And
Think no snow. Yeah, that's what I said, Jeff. No snow.
Bear gotta eat.
All right.
Yeah,
No,
well, get another job.
Kids have snow dances, right? For
They've
no
got it.
snow, for no school the next day. Can we have a spring dance instead for springtime?
Tell you something,
So,
you could use one.
Yes.
we've been here for 2 hours and we have not had a vote.
Yep.
It's good.
Yeah, we should do that more often.
The less things I gotta, times and stuff I gotta keep track of.
Well,
Well, we have one thing, but I'm just saying, so far, we've had
we've had none so far. That's good.
votes.
So our next meeting is when?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Okay, and candidates night, everyone, be
Is
sure to
tomorrow night.
check it out, yep, tomorrow night.
You can
Tomorrow
stay
night,
home.
April 19th,
You can stay home.
at Camelot.
At what time? I can't
What time is it?
What time is it, Mr. Candidate?
Yes,
I have no idea.
Is it 6 o'clock, Mr. Candidate?
No, I wouldn't know. I think it's
No.
6:30.
I think it's 6:30. Thank you very much, Mr.
It's on the
Candidate.
town website.
didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Mr. Candidate.
I'm hoping for snow.
I hope not, God.
Ma-
My poor bluebirds. It's not good. And they wanna start a nest. All of them. Chickadees do too.
Okay, so we took care of the town meeting warrant. We're all set on the budget versus actual. We have the minutes from the meeting of April 11th. It shows everyone was here. I know that a couple people showed up after the start, but
Yeah.
entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of April 11th, 2018.
So moved.
Second it.
Second.
Julie got it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Give everybody a chance to look through and any changes. Gotta get a clerk that shows up. I'm tired of.
Double duty. Okay.
I don't recall seeing that, collective bargaining agreement in those packets, I don't know. Unless I got the one that didn't have it in it, but I'll have to look through all my
I
pages.
remember seeing the thing with the 2% on it, so
All right, does anybody have any changes or corrections or additions?
I don't.
Julie? You're good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, hearing no changes, no corrections.
present it.
Liz?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
Julie? Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yes.
And yes. At 19:52. All right, that covers everything that was on the agenda. Do you have anything that you'd like to see on the next meeting agenda, Julie? Other than the minutes, the budget to actual, the budget and town meeting warrant.
That's by me.
Okay. Does anybody else have any
I don't have any.
requests?
Nope.
If you do, email me.
Email you.
I'm pretty sure I have it set up. I gotta do May 1st tonight, but, And I have to check on the date that I gotta advertise for, I know it's coming up. It's gotta be done by, I think, next week sometime, something I gotta,
Well, you know, if you
Check on
need
that.
help doing anything like that, let me know, and I can run the gardener for you. If you're working, you understand?
the thing I work on is keeping the bear happy.
All right.
All right,
So you got nothing to do then? We're good.
so, we've covered everything on the agenda, unless anybody has anything else. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
Who are you taking?
just like music.
Uh,
Next time our harmony could be better, just so you know.
I'm giving it to Bev now. All right, have motion and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
I.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, let's stay.